Chapter 3. A Magician out of Egypt. It is a singular fact, and perhaps a significant one, that before I can begin to try my luck in this strange quest, Fortune herself comes in quest of me. I have not even taken the tourist privilege of exploring the show places of Bombay. All I know of the city can be comfortably written down on a postcard. My trunks, save one, remain in a sedate, unpacked condition. My sole activity consists in an attempt to familiarize myself with my surroundings in the Hotel Majestic, which a shipboard acquaintance had described as one of the most comfortable hotels in the city. It is through this activity, then, that I make a startling discovery. For staying as a fellow guest of the hotel, I find a member of the magician's fraternity, a weaver of strange spells, in short, a wonder-worker in the flesh. Not that he is one of those juggling fellows, mind you, who make their own and theaters' fortunes by bewildering jaded audiences. He is not some clever individual attempting to emulate the feats of Mascaline and Devant in a less prosaic environment than that of Regent Street. No, this man belongs to the line of medieval sorcerers. He engages daily in commerce with mysterious beings, invisible to normal human eyes, but plain enough to his own. Such, at least, is the peculiar reputation which he has created. The hotel staff regard him with fearful looks and speak of him with bated breath. Whenever he passes by, the other guests instinctively break off conversation, and a puzzled, questioning look comes into their eyes. He makes no overtures to them and usually insists on dining alone. What makes him more intriguing in our eyes is that he bears neither European nor Indian nationality. He is a traveler from the country of the Nile. In very sooth, a magician out of Egypt. It is not easy for me to reconcile the appearance of Mahmud Bey with the sinister powers with which he has been credited. Instead of the stern visage and lean body which I look for, I observe a good-looking, smiling face, a well-built figure with massive shoulders, and the quick walk of a man of action. Instead of the white robe or voluminous cloak, he is sprucely dressed in well-fitting modern clothes. He looks like a handsome Frenchman, such as one might see any evening in the better restaurants of Paris. I ruminate upon the matter for the rest of the day. Next morning I wake up with a clear-cut decision. Mahmud Bey must be forthwith interviewed. I shall get his story, as my fellow scribes of the press might say. I write a few lines expressive of my desire on the back of a visiting card, and then, in the right-hand corner, I draw in tiny characters a certain symbol, which will indicate that I am not unfamiliar with the traditional side of his mysterious art, and which I hope may help me to obtain an interview. I slip the card into the hand of a soft-footed servant, and add a silver rupee, and send him to the magician's room. 5 minutes later the response arrives. Mahmud Bey will see you at once, sir. He is just about to take breakfast and invites you to join him. This first success encourages me. The servant leads the way upstairs, and I find Mahmud Bey seated at a table whereupon there is tea and toast and jam. The Egyptian does not rise to greet me. Instead, he points to a chair opposite him and says in a firm, resonant voice, "Please be seated. Excuse me, but I never shake hands." He wears a loose gray dressing gown. There is a leonine mane of brown hair on his head. A curling lock strays over his forehead. His teeth flash white in a charming smile as he asks, "You will share my breakfast, eh?" I thank him. Over the cups, I inform him of the awe-inspiring reputation which belongs to him in the hotel, and of the prolonged meditation in which I have indulged before having the temerity to approach him. He laughs heartily and raises a hand into the air as a gesture of helplessness, but says nothing. After a pause, he asks, "Are you representing any paper?" "No, I have come to India on a private mission, to study some of the out-of-way things and possibly make a few notes for literary work." "Will you stay here long?" "That depends on circumstances. I have fixed no period." I answer with a queer feeling that the affair is becoming a case of the interviewer interviewed. But his next words reassure me. I, too, am here on an extended visit. Possibly 1 year, possibly 2 years. After that, I am off for the Far East. I would like to see the world and then return to Egypt if Allah permits. The servant enters and clears the table after we have finished. I feel it is time to plunge into deeper water. Is it true that you possess these magical powers? I question him pointedly. Calmly and confidently he says, yes, Allah, the All-Powerful, has granted me such powers. I hesitate. His dark eyes gaze fixedly at me. You would like me to demonstrate them, I believe? He asks suddenly. He has correctly gauged my desire. I nod assent. Very well. Have you a pencil and some paper? I hastily feel in a pocket for my notebook, tear out a page, and then produce a pencil. Good, he remarks. Now please write some question on the paper. With that he withdraws and sits at a small table in the window recess. He half turns his back upon me and looks down into the street below. Several feet of space now separates us. What kind of question? I query. Anything you wish, he replies promptly. My brain plays with a few thoughts. Finally I write down a brief question. It is, where did I live 4 years ago? Now fold the paper repeatedly until it forms a tiny square. He instructs me. Let it be the smallest possible fold. I obey him. Thereupon he draws his chair back to my table and faces me once again. Please clench the piece of paper, together with the pencil, in the palm of your right hand. I hold the articles tightly clutched. The Egyptian closes his eyes. He appears to fall into a profound concentration. Then the heavy lids open once more. The gray eyes look steadily at me, and he quietly says, The question which you asked, was it not, where did you live 4 years ago? You are correct, I reply astonished. This is a case of mind-reading extraordinary. Now, please unfold the piece of paper in your hand. His voice breaks in. I place the tiny scrap upon the surface of the table and slowly open out its many folds until the paper lies flat, extended to its original size. Examine it, commands the other man. I do so and make a surprising discovery. For some unseen hand has written in pencil the name of the town where I lived 4 years ago. The answer has been placed immediately beneath the written question. Mahmud Bey smiles triumphantly. There is the answer. Is it correct? He demands. I give a wondering assent, for I am baffled. The feat hardly seems credible. As a test, I ask him to repeat it. He readily agrees and moves away to the window while I write down a further question. Thus he avoids any possible accusation of being close enough to read my writing. Besides, I watch him carefully and note that his eyes are set upon the colorful scene in the street below. Once again, I fold the paper and clutch it tightly against the pencil which is in my hand. He returns to the table and plunges again into close concentration, his eyes fast shut. Then comes the words. Your second question, what journal did I edit 2 years ago? He has given my query quite accurately. Thought reading again, I presume. Once more he requests me to unfold the tiny scrap in my right hand. I place it flat on the table, and it reveals to my astounded gaze the name of the journal in question, clumsily written in pencil. Conjuring? I dismissed the suggestion as absurd. The paper and pencil were supplied from my own pockets. The questions were unpremeditated, while Mahmud Bey has scrupulously put several feet between us at each writing. Moreover, the entire feat has been performed in the morning daylight. Hypnotism. I have studied the subject and know well when any attempt at undue influence is being made. I know equally how to guard against it. The mysteriously added words still remain on the paper. I am baffled again. For the third time, I request the Egyptian to repeat the experiment, and he agrees to a final test. From this, too, he emerges completely successful. The facts cannot be gainsaid. He has read my mind, as I believe. He has somehow, by some inexplicable magic, caused certain words to be written by an invisible hand upon a piece of paper which I clutch tightly in my hand. And finally, those words form correct replies to my question. What is the strange process he uses? As I ponder over the matter, I feel the presence of uncanny forces. To the normal mind, the thing is incredible. It is something alien and apart from sane existence. My heart almost stands still with a sense of eeriness. Have you men in England who can do this? He asks, half boastfully. I am compelled to admit that I know of none who can perform the feat under similar test conditions, though several professional conjurers can doubtless perform it if allowed to use their own paraphernalia. Would you care to explain your methods? I inquire weakly, fearing that in asking him to reveal his secrets, I am asking for the moon. He shrugs his broad shoulders. I have been offered large sums of money to give my secrets away, but I do not intend to do so yet. You are aware that I am not entirely ignorant of the psychic side of things, I venture. Assuredly, if I ever come to Europe, which is quite possible, you may be able to render certain services to me. In that case, I promise to train you in my methods so that you could do the same things if you wish. How long does the training last? That would differ with different persons. If you worked hard and gave the whole of your time to it, 3 months would be enough to get an understanding of the methods, but after that years of practice may be required. Can you not explain the broad basis of your feats, the theoretical side alone, without explaining your secrets? I persist. Mahmud Bey muses over my query for a while. Yes, I am willing to do that for you, he answers softly. I feel for my shorthand book, draw it out of a pocket, and poise the pencil in readiness to take notes. No, please, not this morning, he protests, smiling. I am busy. You must excuse me now. Come here tomorrow at 1 hour before noon, and we shall continue our talk. Precisely at the appointed time, I sit again in Mahmud Bey's room. He pushes a box of Egyptian cigarettes over the table towards me. I pick one out, and as he proffers the light, he remarks, "These come from my native country. They are good." We lean back in our chairs, puffing a few preliminary whiffs. The smoke is fragrant, aromatic. Certainly these cigarettes are excellent indeed. So, I must now describe my theories as your English friends would call them. To me they are certainties. Mahmud Bey laughs good-naturedly. Perhaps you will be surprised to hear that I am a man expert in scientific agriculture, and that I hold diplomas in the subject, he adds irrelevantly. I begin to scribble a note. That does not seem to fit in with my, shall we say, interest in magic. I know, he continues. I look at him and notice a smile hovering around his lips. He gazes back at me. There's a good story in this man, I reflect. But you are a journalist. Probably you would like to know how I became a magician, eh? He queries. I express an eager assent. Good. I was born in an interior province, but brought up in Cairo. Let me tell you that I was just a normal boy, with the usual interest which schoolboys possess. I was very keen on making agriculture my profession, so I attended the government agricultural college for that purpose. I worked hard at my studies and went on with them most enthusiastically. One day an old man took an apartment in the house where I lived. He was a Jew, with bushy eyebrows and a long gray beard, and his face was always grave and serious. He seemed to be living in the past century, for he wore very old-fashioned clothes. His manner was so reserved that the other inhabitants of the house were kept at a distance. Strangely enough, instead of having the same effect upon me, this mysterious reserve piqued my interest. Being young, self-assertive, and utterly without a trace of shyness, I persistently strove to make his acquaintance. At first he rebuffed me, but that only added fuel to the fire of my curiosity. Eventually he gave way to my constant attempts to engage him in conversation. He opened his doors to me and permitted me to enter his life. Thus I came to learn that he spent much of his time in strange studies and weird practices. In short, he confessed to me that he was making researches into the supernatural side of things. Imagine it. Hitherto my life had run along the even channel of youthful study and healthy sport. Now I was forced abruptly face to face with a totally different kind of existence, and it appealed to me. The thought of the supernatural did not frighten me, as no doubt it would have done other boys. Really, it thrilled me because I saw the possibilities of great adventures opening up through it. I begged the old Jew to teach me something about the subject, and he yielded to my desire. In this way I was brought into a new circle of interest and friends. The Jew took me with him to a society in Cairo, which conducted practical investigations in magic, spiritualism, theosophy, and the occult. He often delivered lectures to them. The group was composed of society people, learned savants, government officials, and other persons of good standing. Although I had only just reached manhood, I was permitted to accompany the old man to every meeting of the society. On each occasion, I listened eagerly. My ears drank in every word of the talk around me. My eyes watched with keen fascination the strange experiments which were so often made. Of course, it was inevitable that my technical studies in agriculture were neglected, so that more time could be given to the researches into supernatural matters. However, I had a natural genius for the former studies and scraped through my diploma examinations without difficulty. I studied the musty old books which the Jew lent me, and practiced the magical rituals and other exercises which he taught me. I made such quick progress that I began to discover things which he himself did not know. At length, I became acknowledged as an expert in these arts. I delivered lectures and gave demonstrations to the Cairo Society, until its members appointed me as its president. For 12 years, I remained its leader. Then I resigned because I wanted to leave Egypt and travel to certain countries, and incidentally to acquire a fortune. Mohammed Bey stopped speaking. His carefully manicured fingers, which I have not failed to observe, flicked the ash from his cigarette. A difficult task? He smiles. For me, it will be easy. I need only a few clients among the super-rich who wish to make use of my magical powers. Already I am known to certain wealthy Parsis and rich Hindus. They come here to consult me about their problems or troubles, or they wish to discover certain things which elude them, or they want information which is only to be procured by occult means. I charge them high fees, naturally. 100 rupees is my minimum. Frankly, I want to make a lot of money and then throw the whole thing up and retire to some quiet interior province in Egypt. I will buy a large orange grove plantation and take up my agricultural work once again. Did you come here direct from Egypt? No. I spent some time in Syria and Palestine after leaving Cairo. The Syrian police officers heard of my powers and occasionally asked me to help them. Whenever they were puzzled by some crime, they used my services as a last resort. Almost always I succeeded in finding the criminal for them. How were you able to do that? The inner secrets of the crimes were revealed to me by my attendant spirits who created a vision of the scenes before my eyes. Mohammed Bey relapses for a minute into reminiscent thought. I wait patiently for his next words. Yes, I suppose you could call me a practicing spiritualist of a sort, since I do invoke the aid of spirits. He goes on. But I am also what you call a magician in the real sense, not a conjurer as well as a thought reader. I do not claim to be anything more than this. His claim is sufficiently startling to require no further additions. Please tell me something about your invisible employees, I ask him. The spirits? Well, it took me 3 years of difficult practice to get my present control of them. You see, in the other world which exists outside our material senses, there are bad as well as good spirits. I try to use good spirits only. Some of them are human beings who have passed through what the world calls death. But most of my attendants are jinns, that is, native inhabitants of the spirit world who have never possessed a human body. Some of them are just like animals, others are as shrewd as men. There are also evil jinns. We call them jinns in Egypt, and I do not know any suitable English word for them, who are used by low sorcerers, especially by the African witch doctors. I refuse to have anything to do with them. They are dangerous servants and will sometimes turn treacherously on the man who is using them and kill him. Who are these human spirits you employ? I can tell you that one of them is my own brother. He died some years ago. But remember, I am not a spiritualist medium, for no spirit ever enters my body or is allowed to control me in any way. My brother communicates with me by impressing upon my mind whatever thought he wishes, or by bringing a picture, vision before my mind's eye. That is how I knew the questions you wrote down yesterday. And the jinns? I have as many as 30 at my command. Even after obtaining mastery over them, I had to train them how to do my bidding, just as you train children to dance. I have to know the name of each one, because you cannot bring or use them without knowing their names. Some of these names I learned from the musty old books which the Jew lent me. Mahmud Bey pushes the cigarette box towards me again and then continues. I have given each spirit a particular duty. Each one is trained to do a separate work. Thus, the jinns who produced the pencil-written words on your piece of paper yesterday would be quite unable to help me discover the nature of your questions. How do you get into contact with these spirits, is my next query. I can call them to me very quickly merely by concentrating in thought upon them, but in practice I usually write down in Arabic the name of the spirit required. That is sufficient to bring it to me almost at once. The Egyptian looks at his watch. He rises and says, And now, my friend, I regret to say I cannot give you any further explanation of my methods. Perhaps you will now understand why I must keep them secret. We may meet again one day if Allah wills. Goodbye. He flashes his teeth in a smile as he bows. The interview is at an end. Night in Bombay. I go to bed late, but not to sleep. The heavy air suffocates me. It seems to contain no oxygen, and its heat is intolerable. The whirling blades of an electric fan which hangs from the ceiling bring little relief, certainly not sufficient to induce my weary eyes to close. I find that the simple act of breathing is a distinct labor. The air is hot enough to hurt my inexperienced lungs with every dilation. My wretched body becomes flaccid and drips a continuous stream of perspiration which my pajamas soak up. Worse, my oppressed brain finds no rest. The devil of insomnia enters my life this night and is destined to haunt me until the day when my shoes tread Indian soil for the last time. I have begun to pay the inevitable price of acclimatation to the tropical world. A mosquito net hangs around my bed like a white shroud. Through a tall window which opens on the veranda balcony, the moonlight comes streaming and casts eerie shadows on the pale ceiling. Musing over the morning's talk with Mahmud Bey and the astounding phenomena of the previous day, I seek for some explanation other than that he has given me, but can find none. If those 30 or more mysterious servitors of his really exist, then one is back in the medieval period when, assuming legend does not always lie, magicians flourished in every city of Europe, though often hindered in their dark work by church and state. The more I seek for an explanation, the more I retreat baffled. Why had Mahmud Bey instructed me to hold the pencil simultaneously with the piece of paper? Did his alleged spirits draw some constituent atoms from the lead to enable them to write the answers? I cast about in memory for instances of similar feats. Does not the famous Venetian voyager Marco Polo relate somewhere in his book of travel how he came across certain magicians in China, Tartary, and Tibet, how they were able to perform pencil writing without contact? And did not those wizards inform him that this weird art was known and practiced among their people since centuries before? I remember, too, the Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the enigmatic Russian lady who founded the Theosophical Society, produced somewhat parallel phenomena 50 years ago. Certain favored members of her society received somewhat lengthy messages through her agency. They propounded philosophical questions, and the replies were scrawled, precipitated, she called it, upon the actual letter paper bearing the questions. It is curious that Blavatsky claimed intimate acquaintance with both Tartary and Tibet, the very lands where Marco Polo met with the same phenomena. Yet Madame Blavatsky did not claim to control any mysterious spirits as Mahmud Bey had done. Her assertion was that the mysterious writings emanated from her Tibetan masters, who lived in the flesh and lurked unseen as the inspirers of her society. Apparently they were better hands at the feat than the Egyptians, for they produced such writings hundreds of miles from Tibet. There had been much dispute at the time whether the Russian lady's phenomena were really genuine, and whether her Tibetan teachers really existed. But that is not my concern. For that brilliant woman has long since gone to the other world in which she seems so much at home while yet here. I know my own experience, and what I have witnessed with my own eyes. I must accept the genuineness of the performance, even if I reserve its explanation. Yes, Mahmud Bey is a magician, a 20th century wizard. My discovery of him so soon after landing on Indian earth seems to be a herald, apt and prophetic, of even stranger discoveries yet. Metaphorically, I have cut the first notch in my stick of Indian experience. Actually, I have put down the first note on the virgin white sheets of my notebook. Chapter 4. I Meet a Messiah. "I am pleased to meet you," is the somewhat conventional greeting with which I am received by Meher Baba. He is destined, had I but known it, to flash like a meteorite across the western sky and to rouse the curiosity of millions of people in Europe and America. Moreover, like a meteorite, he will fall ingloriously to earth. I am the first Western journalist to interview him, for I track him down to his Indian abode when he is almost unknown to more than local fame. I become acquainted with one of his chief disciples, and after some correspondence, wonder what manner of man has joined the ranks of self-appointed deliverers of mankind. 2 Parsi disciples come to Bombay to escort me. Before we leave the city, they inform me that it is necessary to make a present of choice flowers and fruits to their master. So we proceed to the bazaar and they collect a large hamper of these commodities on my behalf. Our train arrives at Ahmednagar next morning, after traveling through the night. I remember it as the historical place where the cruel emperor Aurangzeb, preserver of the faith and ornament of the Mughal throne, stroked his heavy beard for the last time, for death caught him here in his tent. A rackety old wartime Ford car, which does duty for the transport needs of Meher Baba's retreat, waits for us at the station. The 7-mile run which follows takes us through flat country. An avenue of neem trees lines part of the road. We pass a village whose huddled brown roofs rise against the elaborate little spire of the local temple. Then I sight a stream, whose banks are lined with pink and yellow flowers, and in whose muddy waters buffaloes are blissfully resting. We arrive at Meher Baba's curious colony, which is spread out in scattered erections. 3 odd-looking stone structures, which I learn later are the remnants of a dismantled army campsite, stand in a field. 3 plain wooden bungalows stand in an adjacent one. A quarter of a mile away is a little village whose name is given as Arangaon. The whole place presents a bare appearance and seems half deserted. My Parsi escorts are at pains to inform me that this is only the country headquarters of their master, and that his principal center is near the town of Nasik, where the majority of his intimate disciples reside and where visitors are usually received. A few men emerge from one of the bungalows as we pass. They lounge on the veranda, smile, gesticulate, and seem pleased at the arrival of a European in their midst. We cross a field and reach a queer-looking structure which is nothing less than an artificial cave. It is built of stones and rubble cemented together and is about 8 feet deep. It faces due south and receives the bright morning sunlight full in its interior. I look around and see the rolling expanse of fields, the ring of hills which bounds the horizon on the east, and the tree-shaded village down in a hollow. This Parsi holy man is doubtless a great lover of nature, for he has set his retreat in a scene of aloof, untroubled peace. I am indeed glad to find such a quiet backwater after the whirl of Bombay life. 2 men stand on guard like sentries outside the cave's entrance. They move at our approach and go inside to consult their master. "Put out your cigarette," whispers one of my escorts. "Baba does not like smoking." I throw the offending cigarette away. A minute later, I am conducted into the august presence of the so-called new Messiah. He squats at the far end of the cave, the entire floor of which is covered with a beautifully patterned Persian rug. He proves to be somewhat different from the person I have imagined. His eyes do not penetrate me. His facial expression lacks strength. And although I am aware something ascetic, unworldly, and gentle in his atmosphere, I wonder why I feel no responsive thrill, such as one may reasonably expect to feel in the presence of one who proposes to win the allegiance of millions of people. He is clothed in a long, spotless white robe, which looks ludicrously like an old-fashioned English nightshirt. His amiable and kindly face is framed in chestnut-colored hair, which falls in long curly waves to his neck. I am struck by the soft, silky texture of the hair, which is remarkably like the hair of a woman. His nose rises into arched prominence and then descends into aquiline depth. The eyes are dark, medium-sized and clear, but I find them unimpressive. A heavy brown mustache stretches across his upper lip. The light-tinted olive skin betrays his Persian origin, for his father hails from the land of the Shahs. Withal, he is young, apparently somewhere in the 30s. A final feature which remains in memory is his forehead. It is so low as to appear less than average height, and it is so receding as to make me wonder. Do brain areas carry qualitative significance? Does a man's forehead indicate his powers of thought? But possibly a Messiah is above such physical limitations. "I am pleased to see you," he remarks, but not, mind you, in the usual manner of human speech, for he holds a small alphabet board upon his lap and points rapidly with his index finger to one letter after another, as the words are spelled out in this dumb pantomime manner. His secretary interprets them aloud for my benefit. Since the 10th of July, 1925, the holy man has not uttered a single word. His younger brother tells me that when the new Messiah breaks into speech, his message will startle the world. Meanwhile, he adopts a pose of strict silence. Still fingering the board, Meher Baba makes some kindly inquiries into my personal well-being, asks questions about my life, and expresses his gratification at my interest in India. He possesses an excellent knowledge of English, so there is no necessity to translate my speech. He postpones till the late afternoon the lengthy interview which I request. "Food and rest are your immediate needs," he says, or rather communicates. I adjourn to one of the stone structures. It possesses a bare, gloomy interior, but contains an old bedstead without bedding, a ramshackle table, and a chair which might have rendered good service during the Indian Mutiny. Here I am to make my home for nearly a week. I peer through the glassless window and am rewarded by a view of sparse, untilled fields stretching away into scrub bush dotted with cactus. 4 hours creep lethargically around my watch. Once again I sit upon the Persian rug, face to face with Meher Baba, whose colossal claim that he is destined to give spiritual light and practical leading to the whole of mankind I have yet to investigate. He puts his claim in the first sentence, which he flicks out on the alphabet board. "I shall change the history of the whole world, I." My note-taking disturbs him, however. "Can you not make your notes after you leave me?" I agree, and henceforth inscribe his words upon the pages of memory. As Jesus came to impart spirituality to a materialistic age, so I have come to impart a spiritual push to present-day mankind. There is always a fixed time for such divine workings, and when the hour is ripe I shall reveal my true nature to the entire world. The great teachers of religion, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and Zoroaster, do not differ in their essential doctrines. All these prophets came from God. The chief commandments run through all their teachings like a golden thread. These divine ones came out into public when their help was most needed, when spirituality was at its lowest ebb and materialism was apparently everywhere victorious. Such a time we are fast approaching at present. The whole world is now enmeshed in sensual desires, in racial selfishness and money worship. God is forsaken. True religion is abused. Man seeks life, and the priests usually give him a stone. God, therefore, must send his true prophet among men once again to establish true worship and to awaken people out of their materialistic stupor. I but follow in the line of these earlier prophets. This is my mission. God has given me a mandate. I listen quietly while the secretary voices these amazing assertions. I keep my mind open, uncritical, and offer no mental resistance. This is not to say that I accept them, however, but that I am aware one must know how to listen among these Orientals. Otherwise a Westerner will get little for his pains, even where there might be something worthy of acceptance. Truth can stand a ruthless investigation, but the methods of the Occident must be modified to suit the mental atmosphere of the Orient. Meher Baba smiles genially at me and then proceeds. The prophets laid down certain rules and regulations to help the masses lead better lives and to incline them towards God. Gradually these rules become the tenets of an organized religion. But the idealistic spirit and motive force which prevailed during the founder's lifetime disappear gradually after his death. That is why organizations cannot bring spiritual truth nearer, and why true religion is always a personal concern. Religious organizations become like archaeological departments trying to resuscitate the past. Therefore, I shall not attempt to establish any new religion, code, or organization, but I shall rejuvenate the religious thought of all peoples, instill a higher understanding of life into them. Dogmas invented centuries after the founder's death frequently differ startlingly, but the fundamentals of all religions are really the same, because all issue from the same source, God. Therefore, when I appear publicly, I shall run down no existing religion, but then I shall not uphold any special one. I want to turn men's minds away from sectarian differences, so that they will agree on essential truths. Remember, though, that every prophet considers the times, the circumstances, and the prevailing mentality of the people before his public manifestation. He therefore preaches doctrines best understood and the best suited to such conditions. Meher Baba pauses for a while to let these exalted ideas soak into my head, and then his words take a new turn. Have you not noticed how all the nations have been brought into quick communication with each other during this modern epoch? Do you not see how railways, steamships, telephones, cables, wireless, and newspapers have caused the whole world to become a closely woven unit? An important event which happens in one country is made known within a day to the people of a country 10,000 miles away. Therefore, a man who wishes to deliver an important message can find almost the whole of mankind as a ready audience. For all that, there is a sound reason. The time is soon coming to give mankind a universal spiritual belief which shall serve all races of people and all countries. In other words, the way is being prepared to enable me to deliver a worldwide message. This breathtaking announcement indicates sufficiently that Meher Baba possesses an unlimited faith in his own future, and indeed his whole manner confirms it. In his own estimation, his stock will one day stand at infinitely more than par. But when shall you tell the world about your mission? I ask. I shall break my silence and deliver my message only when there is chaos and confusion everywhere, for then I shall be most needed. When the world is rocking in upheavals, earthquakes, floods, and volcanic eruptions. When both East and West are aflame with war. Truly the whole world must suffer, for the whole world must be redeemed. Do you know the date of this war? Yes, it is not far off, but I do not wish to reveal the date. That is a terrible prophecy, I exclaim. Meher Baba spreads out his thin, tapering fingers apologetically. It is. The war will be terrible in its nature because scientific ingenuity will make it more intense than the last war. However, it will last only a short time, a few months, and at its worst I shall make myself publicly known and declare my mission to the entire world. By my material efforts and spiritual powers, I shall speedily bring the conflict to an abrupt end, thus restoring peace to all the nations. Yet great natural changes must take place on this planet simultaneously. Life and property in different parts of the globe will suffer. If I play the role of a Messiah, it will be because world conditions require it. Be assured that I shall not leave my spiritual work undone." His secretary, a short, dusky-faced man who wears the round black cap of the Maratha people, looks at me impressively after he finishes speaking the last word. The expression on his face seems to say, "There, how do you like that? You see what important things we know here?" His master's fingers begin to move over the board once more, and he hastens to tell me their new import. After the war will come a long era of unique peace, a time of world tranquility. Disarmament will then no longer be a matter of mere talk but an actual fact. Racial and communal strife will cease. Sectarian hatred between religious organizations will come to an end. I shall travel widely throughout the world, and the nations will be eager to see me. My spiritual message will reach every land, every town, every village even. Universal brotherhood, peace among men, sympathy for the poor and downtrodden, love of God. I shall promote these things. What of India, your own country? In India I shall not rest till the pernicious caste system is uprooted and destroyed. India became depressed in the scale of nations with the establishment of caste. When the outcast and lower castes are elevated, India will find herself to be one of the influential countries of the world. And what of her future? Despite its faults, India is still the most spiritual country in the world. The future will find it the moral leader of all the nations. All the great founders of religions were born in the East, and it is to the East that the peoples must continue to look for spiritual light. I try to visualize the great Western nations sitting at the feet of the meek little brown men, but fail. Perhaps the white-robed figure squatting in front of me grasps my difficulty, for he adds, "The so-called subjection of India is not real subjection. It is of the body, and therefore temporary. The soul of the country is deathless and great, even if outwardly the nation has lost its power." This subtle explanation somewhat eludes my understanding. I return to our earlier theme. We in the West have heard most of the things in your message from other sources. You have nothing new to tell us, then. My words can only echo the old spiritual truths, but it is my mystic power that will bring a new element into the world's life. Upon this point I seek to rest my brain. For a while there is silence. I ask no more questions. I turn my head and gaze out of the cave. Far across the quiet fields, a line of hills rises in the distance. In the sky, a pitiless sun scorches man, beast, and earth alike. The minutes pass. In this secluded cave, in this unending heat, surrounded by absorbent minds, it is easy to weave grandiose schemes of world reformation, to possess oneself of extravagant religious ideas. But out in the world of reality, amid the hard life of materialistic cities, these things would soon dissipate like mist before the dawning sun. Europe is hard, skeptical, I remarked, turning and looking at the new Messiah. How are you going to convince us that you speak with real divine authority? How can you convert unfamiliar peoples to your brand of spiritual belief? The average Westerner will tell you that it is impossible, and very likely he will laugh at you for your pains. Ah, you do not realize how changed the times will be. Meher Baba strokes his pale, slender hands, and then he adds some astounding claims which sound fantastic to Western ears, yet his manner is quite matter-of-fact. Once I publicly announce myself as a Messiah, nothing will be able to withstand my power. I shall openly work miracles in proof of my mission at the same time, restoring sight to the blind, healing the sick, maimed and crippled, yes, even raising the dead. These things will be child's play to me. I shall work these miracles because through them people will everywhere be forced to believe in me, and then believe in my message. These wonders will not be done to satisfy idle curiosity, but to convince the skeptically minded. I hold my breath. The interview has reached the boundary of common sense. My mind begins to falter. We are entering the region of Oriental fantasy. Make no mistake, however, continues the Parsi Messiah. I tell my disciples that these miracles are to be done only for the masses, not for them. I should not care to perform a single wonder, but I know that this will turn the minds of common people to my words. If I shall astonish the peoples of the world with these feats, it will be only because I wish to spiritualize them. Baba has already done marvelous things, breaks in the secretary. I am instantly alert. Such as? I demand quickly. The master smiles, self-deprecatingly. Tell him another time, Vishnu, he communicates. I can perform any miracle when necessary. It is easy to one who has reached my divine state. I make a mental note to buttonhole the secretary on the morrow and get some details of these reputed marvels. They will form an interesting part of my investigation. I come as a circumspect inquirer, and every kind of fact will make grist for my mill. There is another interlude of silence. I request the holy man to give me certain information about his career. Tell him that also, Vishnu, he answers, directing me again to his secretary. You will have plenty of opportunity to talk to my disciples, since you are staying here for a little while. They can tell you about the past. The talk drifts into the domain of general matters. Soon after, our meeting disperses. The first thing I do on getting back to my quarters is to light a cigarette, thus atoning for the one forbidden me, and then watch its fragrant smoke rise erratically upward. I witness a curious spectacle in the early evening. The stars have just begun to twinkle faintly. The day is not quite dead, and in this queer half-light, a few oil lanterns glow palely. Meher sits inside his cave while a motley crowd composed of his disciples, visitors, and people from the nearby village of Rangaon gather in horseshoe fashion around the entrance. A ceremony which is repeated every evening wherever Meher may be at the time is about to take place. A devotee holds aloft a shallow metal bowl which serves as a lamp, its wick being dipped in oil which is strongly perfumed with sandalwood. He waves it 7 times around the saintly head of his master. The assembled audience thereupon break into a vigorous chorus of chants and prayers. Through the intonations of their Marathi dialect, I catch the name of Baba several times. It is obvious that the chants are hyperboles of adulation for their master. Everyone looks at him with adoring eyes. Meher's younger brother sits at a small portable harmonium and makes a wailing kind of music to accompany the singers. During the course of the ceremony, each devotee files up to the cave in turn, prostrates himself before Meher, and kisses his uncovered feet. Some are so overwrought with pious emotion that they prolong the act of osculation to a full minute. I am told that this act is deemed extremely beneficial spiritually, since it brings Meher's blessing upon the devotee and automatically washes away some of his sins. I walk back to my quarters, wondering what the next day will bring forth. Somewhere across the fields and out in the jungle, a jackal bays and breaks the night's silence. The next day I gather the secretary and some of the English-speaking disciples outside of one of their wooden bungalows. We sit in half a circle. Those who do not understand English stand a little distance away and watch us with smiling faces and interested eyes. I proceed to extract from all these collective minds and memories such facts about their amazing master's career as I do not already know. His personal name is Meher, but he calls himself Sadguru Meher Baba. Sadguru means perfect master, while Baba is simply a form of affection in common use among some of the Indian peoples, and it is by this name alone that his disciples usually address him. Meher Baba's father is a Persian who is an adherent of Zoroastrian creed and who emigrated to India as a poor youth. Meher was his first son and was born in 1894 at Pune City. The boy was put to school at 5, proved good at his studies, and passed the matriculation examination at 17. He then entered Deccan College in Pune. and received a good modern education for 2 years. Now began the tortuous and incomprehensible phase of his career. He was cycling back from school one evening and was about to pass the dwelling place of a well-known Mohammedan woman, fakir. Her name was Hazrat Babajan, and she was reputed to be over a century old. She was reclining on a long couch which stood upon a railed veranda outside her humble wooden one-roomed house. When the cycle drew abreast of her, the old woman rose and beckoned to the boy. He dismounted and approached her. She clasped his hands and embraced him and then kissed his forehead. What happened afterwards is not very clear. I gathered that the youth reached his home in a dazed mental state and that during the following 8 months his mental faculties progressively weakened until he became unable to study properly. In the end, he had to bid a final farewell to his college because he could no longer follow his lessons. Thereafter, young Meher fell into a semi-idiotic condition and was hardly able to look after himself. His eyes became dull and lifeless, and he lacked the intelligence to perform the most elementary duties of a human being, such as taking food, washing oneself, attending to the calls of nature, and so on. When his father said, "Eat," he took his food in a mechanical manner. Otherwise, he did not understand why the food was put before him. In short, he became a human automaton. The young man at 20, whose parents have to care for him like a child of 3, seems a case of mental regression, and the distracted father concluded that he had overworked his mind while cramming for an examination. Meher was taken to various doctors, who diagnosed mental breakdown and gave him injections. In 9 months' time, improvement in his lamentable condition set in and gradually increased, until he was able to understand his environment intelligently and to act more normally. After his recovery, it was discovered that his character had changed. His scholastic ambitions were gone. His ambitions for a worldly career had disappeared, while his interest in games and sports had collapsed. All these things were replaced by a deep thirst for the religious life and by a continuous aspiration to spiritualize himself. Because he believed that these changes took their root in the kiss which the Mohammedan woman fakir had bestowed on him, Meher approached the old lady for advice about his future. She directed him to find a spiritual teacher. He inquired where this boon was to be obtained. She waved her hand vaguely into space for reply. He visited several holy men of repute in the locality. Then he went farther afield to the villages within 100 miles of his native Pune. One day he walked into a little stone-built temple near Sakori. It was a poor, humble shrine, but it was the abode of a very holy man, or so the villagers said. And so when Meher came face to face with Upasani Maharaj, he felt that he had found his master. The young aspirant for holiness made periodic excursions from home to Sakori. He usually spent a few days at a time with his teacher, but once he remained for 4 months. Meher asserts that during this period he was being perfected, made ready for his mission. One evening he collected 30 of his old schoolmates and boyhood friends, gave them mysterious hints of an important meeting, and brought them to the little temple at Sakori. The doors were locked, and Upasani Maharaj, the stern-looking holy man who lived there, rose and addressed the gathering. He spoke to them about religion, told them to seek virtue, informed them that he had made Meher the spiritual inheritor of his own mystic powers and knowledge, and finally announced to the surprised young men that Meher had attained divine perfection. He strongly advised them to become followers of their Parsi friend, for then they would receive great spiritual benefit both in this life and in that to come. Some of his listeners took his advice and others remained skeptical. About a year later, when Meher had reached the age of 27, the young Parsi announced to his small flock that he had become conscious of a divine mission which he was to carry out, and that God had given him a work of colossal importance to mankind. He did not straightaway reveal the precise nature of that mission, but within a few years he let the secret emerge. He was destined to become a Messiah. In 1924, Meher left India for the first time. He embarked on a journey to Persia with the company of half a dozen disciples, telling them that he would tour the country of his ancestors. When the ship touched port at Bushire, he suddenly changed his mind and left the place by the next homeward boat. 3 months later, rebel forces captured Tehran, the Persian capital, and deposed the old regime. A new Shah came to the throne. Meher Baba then turned to his followers and said, "Now you see the result of my mystic workings during my visit to Persia." His disciples told me that Persia was a happier land under the new ruler, and that the Mohammedans and Zoroastrians, Jews and Christians were living amicably together, whereas there had been constant strife and cruel outrages among them under the old regime. Some years after this mysterious excursion, Meher Baba began a curious educational institution. At his suggestion, a disciple purchased the colony's present site near the village of Rangaon. Several rough bungalows were constructed, together with many thatch and pole huts. A free boarding school was then declared open, the teachers being recruited from the Parsi's educated disciples and the pupils from the families of devotees or their friends. No fees were charged for tuition, while even board and lodging were free. In addition to the usual secular subjects, there was special instruction in non-denominational religion by Meher himself. On such attractive terms, it was an easy matter to collect nearly 100 boys. A dozen of them arrived from distant Persia. The boys were taught the moral ideals which are more or less common to most religions, and the life stories of the great prophets were unfolded to them. The class on religion gradually became the central feature of the curriculum, and Meher Baba led the older boys in a devotional mysticism which appears to have been of a somewhat watery nature. They were taught to regard him as a sacred personage, even to worship him. A few boys began to manifest signs of religious hysteria in the sequence. Strange scenes occurred among them every few days. A noticeable feature of this unusual school was that the pupils belonged to varying castes, races, and creeds. Hindus, Mohammedans, Indian Christians, and Zoroastrians mingled freely. But Meher Baba wanted a still wider enrollment. He sent his chief disciple on a mission to England to find a few white pupils. The emissary, however, encountered much difficulty because the white parents were unwilling to entrust their children to a stranger who wanted to haul the latter off to a school in distant Asia. Moreover, the idea of a school combining all religions did not mean much to them. There are plenty of schools in England where pupils of different creeds foregather in a natural, spontaneous manner without the fuss that is made of it in a creed-ridden country like India. One day the emissary from India met an Englishman who straightway became converted to the acceptance of the Parsi Messiah after a conversation or two. The man was possessed of an enthusiastic temperament, and having rapidly traveled through all the cults which honeycomb London, he was ready for what seemed to be the loftier message of Meher Baba. So he assisted in the quest for white pupils and found 3 children whose poverty-stricken parents were willing to ease their own burdens at the price of parting with them. At this stage, the Indian office bestirred itself into activity, investigated the matter, shook its official head, and put a ban on the project. The children did not sail. The representative of the Parsi Messiah returned to India, accompanied by the Englishman and the latter's wife and sister-in-law. 5 or 6 months after their arrival, Meher Baba sent them back to England at the expense of his chief disciple. I learnt from Meher that his object in founding this school was twofold. First, he wanted to break down the racial and religious barriers among the pupils. Secondly, he sought to train a selected number of them as future ambassadors for a spiritual cause. When the years had sufficiently ripened them, and the time came for public announcement of his own mission, he would send them out to all the 5 continents to act as apostles and helpers in his destined work of spiritualizing mankind. Another activity developed into being alongside the school. A primitive hospital was opened, and ardent disciples were sent out to collect the blind, the ailing, and the crippled from the locality. The latter were given free medical treatment, food, and accommodation, while the Parsi holy man provided them with spiritual consolation. 5 lepers were cured by his mere touch, says an enthusiastic devotee. Alas, I am a trifle skeptical, for no one knows who they are, where they are, or how to find them now. 'Tis a piece of oriental exaggeration, I fear. Surely one of the lepers would have attached himself to Meher Baba's train of disciples in sheer gratitude. Surely the news would have spread like a prairie fire across the leprosy-ridden India, and all the stricken souls of the country would have eagerly flocked to the hospital near Arangaon. There grew up a large camp following of devotees, visitors, and hanger-ons from nearby villages. The population of this unusual colony reached into hundreds. Intense religious fervor pervaded the whole place, and Meher Baba was, of course, the center of the whole picture. 18 months after the colony was founded, it was suddenly closed down and all these activities were abandoned. The boys were sent back to their parents and the patients to their homes. Meher Baba vouchsafed no reason for this move on his part. I learnt that sudden, inexplicable impulses of this kind were a regular feature of his conduct. In the spring of 1929, he sent out his first missionary disciple, a man named Sadhu Leek, who was bidden to go on tour around India. The latter was told as a parting injunction, "You have the advantage of a Messiah to work for. Be cosmopolitan and do not run down any religion. Be sure that I will know all about you. Do not be disheartened by the remarks of others. I will lead you and follow none but me." From the information which I picked up, it was obvious that the poor fellow was physically unfitted for a wandering life. He was able to create a small following in Madras, but soon sickened on the way, and then returned to die. Such is a rapid outline of the Parsi holy man's career. I have had several fugitive talks of a chatty nature with Meher Baba, but I want to hear something more definite about his self-appointed mission to the world. So I seek and obtain my final interview with him. He wears a soft blue scarf today, and the alphabet board rests upon his knees in readiness for our conversation. The disciples present form an admiring audience and provide the requisite background. Everyone smiles at everyone else until I shoot a sudden question through the silence. "How do you know you are a Messiah?" The disciples look aghast at my temerity. The master moves his bushy eyebrows, but he is not disconcerted, for he smiles at the inquiring Westerner and quickly answers, I know it so well. You know that you are a human being, and so I know that I am a Messiah. It is my whole life. My bliss never stops. You never mistake yourself for some other person, so I cannot mistake who I am. I have a divine work to do, and I will do it." "What really happened when the Mohammedan woman, fakir, kissed you? Can you remember?" "Yes, until then I was as worldly as other youths. Hazrat Babajan unlocked the door for me. Her kiss was the turning point. I felt as though the universe was receding into space, and I was left entirely alone. Yes, I was alone, with God. For months I could not sleep, and yet I grew no weaker but remained as strong as before. My father did not understand. He thought I was going mad. He called in one doctor and then another. They gave me medicines and tried injections, but they were all wrong. I was with God, and there was nothing to cure. Only I had lost hold of normal existence, and it took me a long time to get back. Do you understand?" "Quite. Now that you have got back, when will you let the public know?" "My manifestation will happen in the near future, but I cannot give you the exact date." "And then? My task on this earth will last for 33 years. Afterwards I shall undergo a tragic death. My own people, the Parsis, will be responsible for my violent end, but others will continue my work." "Your disciples, I presume?" "My circle of 12 selected disciples, of whom one will become a master at the appointed time. It is for their sake that I fast often and observe silence, for this wipes their sins away and will enable them to become perfect spiritually. They have all been with me in past births, and I am bound to help them. There will also be an outer circle with 44 members. They will be men and women of lower spiritual grade. Their duty will be to assist the 12 chief disciples after the latter have attained perfection. There are other claimants to messiahship. Meher laughs in deprecation of those absurd persons. Yes, there is Krishnamurti. Mrs. Besant's protege, the Theosophists, deceived themselves. Their chief wire pullers are supposed to be somewhere on the Himalayas in Tibet. You will find nothing but dust and stones in their supposed abodes. Besides, no real spiritual teacher ever required someone else's body to be prepared and trained for his use. That is ridiculous. Other strange statements emerge from this final conversation. A curious jumble of assertions, which come through slim fingers flickering from letter to letter. America has a great future. She will become a spiritually minded nation. I am aware of everyone who puts his faith in me, and he is always helped. Do not try to read my actions. You will never fathom them. Once I visit a place and stay there, however short a time, its spiritual atmosphere becomes greatly elevated. The general spiritual push that I shall give the world will soon put right all material problems, economic, political, sexual, sociological, for selfishness will be destroyed and brotherhood will replace it. Shivaji, the chieftain who built up the Maratha Empire in the 17th century, is also here. He points to himself. The meaning is that Meher is a reincarnation of Shivaji. Some of the planets are inhabited. They resemble this globe in culture and material advancement, but spiritually our Earth is most advanced. One observes that Meher suffers from no modesty when discussing his claims. I'm a little startled, however, when he communicates a command to me at the finish of the interview. Go to the West as my representative. Spread my name as that of the coming divine messenger. Work for me in my influence, and you will then be working for the good of mankind. The world will probably scout me as a madman. I reply uneasily, for such a task staggers my imagination. Meher disagrees. I answer that nothing short of working a series of miracles will convince the West that anyone is a spiritual superman, let alone a messiah, and that since I cannot perform miracles, I cannot undertake the job of being his herald. Then you shall perform them, is his comforting assurance. I remain silent. Meher misconstrues my silence. Stay with me, and I shall confer great powers on you. He urges, you are very fortunate. I will help you to obtain advanced powers, so that you will render service in the West. It is unnecessary to describe the remainder of this incredible interview. Some men are born great, some achieve greatness, and others appoint a press agent. Meher seems to favor the latter course. Next day I prepare to leave. I have imbibed sufficient pious wisdom and prophetic forebodings to suffice me for the time. I have not wandered to distant parts of the world merely to hear religious assertions or declarations of grandeur. I want facts, even if they are to be facts of a strange, uncommon kind. And I want reliable evidence. Better still, something personal, something to which I can testify for my own satisfaction. My kit is packed. I am about to leave. I go to Meher and bid him a polite farewell. He informs me that within a few months he will be in residence at his central headquarters, which are situated near the town of Nasik. He suggests that I should visit him there and stay for a month. Do this. Come when you can. I will give you wonderful spiritual experiences and enable you to know the real truth about me. You will be shown my inner spiritual powers. After that, you will have no more doubts. You will be able to prove by your own personal experience what I claim. Then you can go to the West and win many people for me. I decide to return at my leisure and spend a month with him. Despite the theatrical character of the Parsi holy man and the fantastic nature of his mission, I decide to investigate the whole thing with an open mind. A brief return to the stir of city life in Bombay, and then I entrain for Pune. My wanderings around this ancient land are about to begin. The old Mohammedan holy woman, whose sudden intervention started Meher Baba off on his queer tangent, engages my interest. I deem a short visit to her will not come amiss. I have already made a few preliminary inquiries about her in Bombay, where I learned from former Judge Kandalawala, who has known her for 50 years, that her age is really about 95. I remember that Meher's followers informed me that it was 130, but I generously ascribed this exaggeration to the heat of their enthusiasm. The judge briefly tells me her story. She is a native of Baluchistan, that vague territory situated between Afghanistan and India, and she ran away from home quite early. After long and adventurous wanderings afoot, she arrived at Pune about the beginning of this century and has never moved from the city since. At first she made her home under a neem tree where she insisted on remaining in all seasons. Her reputation for sanctity and strange powers spread throughout the Mohammedan people in the vicinity until even the Hindus came to treat her with due reverence. Some Mohammedans eventually built a wooden shelter under the tree for her, since she refused to live in a proper house. This gives her the semblance of a home and provides some protection against the inclemencies of the monsoon season. I asked the judge for his personal opinion. He replies that he does not doubt but that the Hazrat Babajan is a genuine fakir. The judge happens to be a Parsi, so I make some judicious inquiries about Meher Baba, who is well known to him. What I learn is unlikely to make me more favorable to the Parsi Messiah. I ask him finally about Upasani Maharaj, who is now the inspirer of Meher. My informant, a shrewd, discerning old man of vast experience in these and worldly matters, enters into a lengthy account of his own unfortunate contact with him. I give 2 instances. Upasani had made ghastly mistakes. He once induced me to go to Benares, where he was staying at the time. After a while, I got a premonition of death and wanted to return to Pune, where my family was living. Upasani prevented me from going by repeatedly prophesying that everything would be all right. Nevertheless, 2 days later, I received a telegram saying that my son's wife had given birth to a child and that it died within a few minutes. In the other case, Upasani told my son-in-law, who was thinking of going on the Bombay Stock Exchange, that such a move would prove extremely fortunate for him. Acting on this advice, he embarked on the exchange and was almost ruined. Judge Kandalawala impresses me with the independence of his outlook. He debunks Upasani Maharaj, who Meher Baba has described to me as one of the greatest spiritual personalities of his age. Yet he does not hesitate to admit that Meher himself is honest and really believes in his spiritual attainment, although this attainment remains unproven. I reach Pune, put up at a hotel in the cantonment, and then drive straight to the abode of Hazrat Babajan. The guide who knows her personally, and who will eke out my little Hindustani as an interpreter, accompanies me. We find her in a narrow street whose lighting is a quaint mixture of gaudy little oil lamps and electric globes. She lies, in full view of passers-by, upon a low divan. A fenced veranda rail separates her from the street. Above the wooden shelter rises the shapely outline of a neem tree, whose white blossoms make the air slightly fragrant. "You must take off your shoes," my guide warns me. "It is considered disrespectful to wear them when you enter." I obey him, and a minute later we stand by her bedside. She lies flat on her back, this ancient dame. Her head is propped by pillows. The lustrous whiteness of her silky hair offers a sad contrast to the heavily wrinkled face and seamed brow. Out of my slender store of newly learned Hindustani, I address a phrase of self-introduction to the old lady. She turns her aged head, stretches out a skinny, bony forearm, and then takes one of my hands in her own. She holds it tightly, staring up at me with unworldly eyes. Those eyes puzzle me. They seem to be quite uncomprehending, entirely vacant. She silently grips my hand for 3 or 4 minutes and continues to look blankly into my own eyes. I receive the feeling that her gaze penetrates me. It is a weird sensation, I do not know what to do. At last she withdraws her hand and brushes her forehead several times. Then she turns to my guide and says something to him, but it is in the vernacular and I cannot grasp its meaning. He whispers the translation. He has been called to India and soon he will understand. A pause. Then she croaks forth another sentence, but its meaning were better kept in my memory than in print. Her voice is extremely feeble. Her words emerge slowly, with much difficulty. Is it possible that this aged and decrepit fleshly frame, this haggard and huddled figure, contains the soul of a genuine fakir with wondrous powers? Who can say? It is not always easy to read the pages of the soul by the letters of the body. But the woman is nearing her century. I have been warned that continued conversation with her is not permissible, owing to her enfeebled condition. I prepare to withdraw quietly, strongly impressed by one thought. I think that the vacancy of her eyes is a signal that she is near the gate of death. The mind is parting from the worn-out body, but drags itself back now and again to pay a feeble attention to this world through strange eyes. In the hotel, I sum up my feelings that some deep psychological attainment really resides in the depths of her being. I am certain. Respect rises unbidden within me. I find that the contact has diverted my normal thought currents and raised up an inexplicable sense of that element of mystery which surrounds our earthly lives, despite all the discoveries and speculations of the scientists. I see with unexpected clarity that these scientific writers, who profess to reveal the fundamental secrets of the great world puzzle, profess what is nothing more than surface scratching. But I cannot understand why a brief contact with the woman fakir should so sap at the very base of my confident mental certainties. The cryptic prophecy she made recurs to my mind. I am unable to grasp its meaning. No one has called me to India. Have I not gone freely of my own whim? Only now as I write these lines, long after the event, do I believe that I begin dimly to understand. 'Tis a strange world, my masters.